The restaurant was dim in that deliberate way expensive places prefer. All low amber light and polished wood meant to make everything feel intimate and important at the same time. Candles flickered inside heavy glass holders, their flames bending whenever someone shifted in their seat. The air smelled like butter, charred rosemary, and money being spent without hesitation. Outside the tall windows, the city hummed, distant and indifferent. My name is Elena Marshall. I'm 32 years old. We were there to celebrate my sister. Her promotion. Her engagement. Her latest reinvention. No one was quite sure which version this dinner was meant to honor, but that never stopped my mother from organizing it. She loved moments that looked good from the outside. He loved toasts even more. The table was long, crowded with family and a few friends who laughed a beat too late, following social cues instead of instinct. Crystal glasses caught the light. Plates arrived in synchronized movements, set down with quiet authority. Everything about the night was curated. My mother stood first, tapping her glass with a spoon. The sound cut through the room cleanly practiced. Conversation faded on command. She smiled, radiant, already halfway into the performance. "She's the daughter I'm proud of," she said, lifting her glass toward my sister. Applause followed immediately. Warm, automatic. My sister tilted her head modestly, lips curving into that familiar smile, the one that suggested humility while expecting admiration. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I clapped politely. Once. Maybe twice. I've always known when not to overdo it. I've always been the reliable one. The one who shows up on time. The one who remembers birthdays. The one who books reservations when no one else does and quietly covers gaps without making them visible. I learned early that praise in our family was selective, and survival depended on not needing it. The waiter appeared moments later, moving with the solemnity of someone delivering a verdict. He didn't announce anything. He simply set the leather-bound folder down on the table, directly in front of me. The weight of it made a soft but unmistakable sound as it touched the wood. $3,850. The number sat at the bottom of the page in crisp black ink. Tax included. Tip suggested. No one said anything. My mother didn't look surprised. My sister didn't look confused. In fact, my sister smirked. Just slightly, just enough to register if you were watching for it. The rest of the table waited, forks paused midair, glasses hovering near lips. It was a familiar pause. A rehearsed one. This wasn't the first time. At birthdays. At graduations. At celebratory dinners that somehow always ended the same way. The check drifting toward me like it had its own gravity. No discussion. No question. Just expectation. I remembered another dinner years ago, a smaller place, cheaper lighting. My mother laughing as she said, "You don't mind, right? You're so good with money." I'd smiled then. Paid. Learned. The waiter lingered, eyes flicking briefly between me and the rest of the table, then back again. He was waiting for confirmation. For the ritual to complete itself. My sister leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, satisfied. My mother sipped her wine, already moving on mentally, the toast accomplished. Pride expressed. Hierarchy reinforced. Something in me went still. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Clear. I looked down at the bill again, at the neat breakdown of indulgence. Items I hadn't ordered, bottles I hadn't chosen, a celebration I hadn't been invited to shape. I felt the familiar pull to smooth things over, to keep the moment comfortable for everyone else. I didn't. I stood up slowly, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. The sound carried farther than I expected. Heads turned. Conversation in nearby tables dipped. I picked up the folder, held it for a brief moment, then slid it across the table, back toward my mother and sister. The leather made a quiet sound against the polished wood as it came to rest. The entire room went silent. My mother's smile froze. My sister's smirk faltered, confusion flashing before irritation could replace it. Someone cleared their throat. A glass clinked and stopped. "I think this belongs here," I said calmly. No explanation. No apology. No raised voice. Just placement. The waiter blinked, unsure. The table held its breath. For the first time that night, and maybe for the first time in years, the expectation didn't land where it usually did. And everyone felt it. No one reached for the bill. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, pressing against the low hum of the restaurant. At nearby tables, people continued eating, laughing, living their separate evenings, unaware that something small but seismic had just shifted in hours. The waiter stood still, professional uncertainty written across his face, hands clasped loosely in front of him as if he'd stepped into a scene without a script. My mother recovered first. He always did. "Elena," she said lightly, her smile reassembling itself piece by piece. "Don't be silly. We'll sort it out." Sort it out was code. It meant you'll do what you always do. It meant don't embarrass us. It meant remember your role. I remained standing. The chair behind me felt suddenly irrelevant, like something I'd outgrown without realizing it. "I'm not being silly," I replied, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. "I'm being clear." My sister let out a soft laugh, the kind designed to reframe tension as humor. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "Is this really happening right now?" Her eyes flicked around the table, gathering allies, reminding everyone of the script. This was supposed to be my cue to shrink, to apologize, to fix the mood. I've always been the reliable one, the one who keeps things from breaking. Tonight I didn't. My father shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. He looked from the bill to my mother, then to me, like he was watching a tennis match he hadn't agreed to attend. "Maybe we can just split it," he offered weakly. "No," my sister said quickly, too quickly. "Why would we split it? This was a celebration dinner." "For you," I said. The words landed softly but didn't bounce. My sister's smile tightened. "Wow," she muttered. "So now you're keeping score?" I thought of all the dinners before this one. All the moments that had ended the same way. The checks that slid toward me without discussion. The praise given loudly to others while my contributions stayed invisible. "I'm stopping," I said. "That's different from keeping score." My mother's face hardened just a fraction. The warmth drained, replaced by something colder and more familiar. "You could have talked to me privately," she said. "This didn't need to be a scene." A memory drifted in, me at 25, pulling her aside after another dinner, quietly asking why the bill always came to me. Her hand on my arm, her voice soothing. "You're just better at handling these things." I'd accepted it then because pushing further felt ungrateful. "I did talk," I said. "Just not tonight." The waiter shifted again, uncomfortable but still waiting. I could tell he wanted direction, any direction. The bill still sat untouched where I'd placed it, an object that had suddenly become a mirror. My sister leaned forward, lowering her voice. "So what?" she said. "You're just going to let Mom pay?" "I'm letting the people who ordered decide," I replied. Her eyes flashed. "You're unbelievable." I nodded once. "That's new." Around the table, small reactions rippled. An aunt avoided my gaze. A cousin stared openly, curious rather than judgmental. Someone reached for their wine glass and stopped halfway, unsure if it was appropriate to keep drinking while the ground shifted. My mother inhaled sharply, then exhaled through a smile meant to signal closure. "Fine," she said. "I'll take care of it." She reached for the folder, fingers stiff. As she did, I noticed something I hadn't before. The tension in her shoulders, the quick calculation behind her eyes. This wasn't just about pride. It was about control. About the certainty that I would always step in. The waiter nodded gratefully and took the bill from her. Relief washed across his face as he retreated, grateful to escape the gravity of the moment. Conversation tried to restart, but it came back wrong. Too loud. Too forced. Jokes landed flat. My sister scrolled on her phone, jaw set. My mother sipped her wine without tasting it. I sat back down then, not because I'd been asked to, but because I chose to. The chair felt solid beneath me. Grounded. Inside, something quiet and irreversible had settled. This wasn't about $3,850. It was about what happens when the person everyone counts on decides to stop being counted on, and starts being counted in. The bill had been paid, but the cost of the evening was only just beginning to register. The rest of the dinner unraveled slowly, like fabric pulled from a loose thread. Conversation resumed in fragments. Weather, travel plans, a show someone was watching, but none of it landed where it was meant to. Every sentence felt like it was stepping around something sharp on the floor. My sister barely spoke. She pushed food around her plate, appetite gone, phone face down now, like even she didn't trust herself not to look away. My mother maintained a brittle composure, smiling too often, laughing half a second too late. Pride had given way to damage control. I ate quietly, noticing things I'd never let myself notice before. How often my father deferred to my mother's cues. How easily my sister assumed space. How no one asked me if I was enjoying the meal I hadn't chosen. Awareness is a strange kind of hunger. It sharpens everything. When dessert arrived, no one suggested sharing. Plates were set down, forks lifted, bites taken mechanically. The waiter avoided eye contact with me now, not out of disrespect but caution, as if I'd become unpredictable. A memory drifted in. Another dinner years ago, smaller stakes, smaller bill. My sister had leaned over then and whispered, "You're lucky Mom doesn't expect much from you." I'd laughed because it was easier than admitting how much that hurt. I've always been the reliable one. Reliable people learn early how to disappear in plain sight. As the night wound down, coats were gathered. Chairs scraped back. The restaurant's low lighting began to feel like a signal. Time to leave, time to return to roles everyone understood. My mother pulled me aside near the entrance, her voice hushed but tight. "You embarrassed me," she said, skipping pleasantries. "In front of everyone." I met her gaze, steady. "You embarrassed me for years," I replied. Quietly. She blinked, clearly not expecting resistance phrased so calmly. "That's not fair." "Neither was the assumption," I said. She sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation rather than reflection. "You've always been so capable. I thought you didn't mind." That was the truth, or at least her version of it. Capability mistaken for consent. Strength treated as surplus. "I minded," I said. "I just didn't make it inconvenient." She looked away then, scanning the room like she was searching for support that wouldn't come. My sister stood near the door, arms crossed, watching us. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was wary. On the sidewalk outside, the night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain and car exhaust. The city felt wider than it had earlier, like there was room to breathe again. People said their goodbyes quickly, hugs perfunctory, promises to do this again soon, offered without conviction. My sister brushed past me, shoulder grazing mine. "Hope it was worth it," she muttered. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because I didn't need her to hear it yet. In the car, alone, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. I noticed they weren't shaking. My phone buzzed as I pulled away. A text from my father. "Are you okay?" Then another from my aunt. That was unexpected. I didn't respond. Some nights don't need commentary. They need space. At home, the quiet wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I was missing. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window watching headlights pass below. The city moved on, indifferent to family dynamics, reliable in a way people often aren't. I thought about what I'd done, and what I hadn't. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't insulted anyone. I hadn't stormed out. I'd simply refused to absorb something that wasn't mine. That felt important. I knew there would be fallout. Conversations. Reframed stories. Subtle punishments dressed up as concern. Families don't give up comfortable patterns easily. But something had shifted. Not dramatically. Structurally. For the first time, the silence I'd created wasn't empty. It was deliberate. And whatever came next, I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't going back to the version of myself who paid just to keep the peace. The aftermath arrived quietly, the way consequences usually do when they can't be ignored but don't want to announce themselves. The next morning, my phone sat still on the nightstand longer than usual. No group texts. No follow-up jokes pretending nothing had happened. Just the low hum of the city outside my window and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I made coffee and stood at the counter watching steam rise, thinking about how many mornings I'd started this way after smoothing over something that hadn't been mine to fix. The kitchen smelled like roasted beans and clean countertops. Ordinary. Grounding. By noon the messages began. My mother first. Long, careful. She wrote that she hadn't realized how much pressure I'd felt. That she'd always admired my independence. That families sometimes fall into patterns without noticing. The words were familiar, arranged in a way that avoided responsibility while sounding thoughtful. My sister's message came next. Torter. Tarper. She said I'd ruined her night. She said Mom didn't deserve that. She said I'd changed. I stared at the screen, noticing something new, the absence of guilt. Not the absence of empathy. I could understand why they were upset. but the absence of that old reflex to immediately repair the discomfort. I've always been the reliable one. The one who anticipates fallout and rushes to cushion it. This time I didn't. I replied to my mother later that afternoon. One sentence. I'm willing to talk but not to return to old expectations. Nothing more. No justification. No apology. Boundaries don't need footnotes. We met a week later for lunch at a quieter place, one without chandeliers or an audience. Sunlight streamed through the windows, honest and unflattering. My mother arrived early, posture stiff, hands folded too tightly around her napkin. When I sat down, she smiled, tentative. She said she'd always been proud of me too, just in a different way. She said she hadn't meant to diminish me. She said the bill had been a misunderstanding. I listened. Then I told her what I'd never said out loud before, that being dependable had turned into being assumed. That praise without respect feels hollow. That I wasn't angry, I was finished pretending. She nodded, eyes shiny, absorbing it slowly. Not everything landed. Some things never do. But the conversation didn't circle back to money. That mattered. With my sister, things stayed cooler. She avoided me at first, then reached out weeks later like nothing had happened, sending a photo from a brunch I hadn't been invited to. I didn't comment. Distance has a way of teaching lessons words can't. Life settled into a new rhythm. Dinners became simpler. Invitations came with questions attached. Checks were discussed before they arrived. Small changes but structural ones. The kind that signal a recalibration rather than a truce. One evening my father called. He didn't talk around things the way he used to. He said he'd never noticed how often the bill came to me. He said he'd assumed it was fine because I never complained. He apologized, not extravagantly, not publicly. Just enough to acknowledge the shift. If you've ever been the one everyone relies on, you know how invisible that labor becomes. Some families mistake silence for agreement because it's convenient. I didn't stop being generous after that night. I stopped being automatic. There's a difference. I still treat people I love. I still give when I choose to. But I don't let gratitude replace consent anymore. The memory of the restaurant still surfaces sometimes. The candlelight, the toast, the smirk, the weight of the bill sliding toward me. But it doesn't sting the way it once did. Feels like a marker now. A line crossed and not uncrossed. I didn't stand up to make a statement. I stood up because sitting down had become a habit I'd outgrown. Peace, I've learned, isn't the absence of conflict. It's the absence of self-betrayal. And that night when the entire room went silent, it wasn't because I'd caused a scene. It was because a pattern finally lost its power. I stopped paying for silence.